So welcome everybody to April's podcast from Cumbria Wildlife Trust. Spring is well on its way at the moment. We're actually sat out recording this in the Plumgarth garden. It's really nice to be able to get out and sit in the sun once again. So we've got a really interesting lineup today, a very springy lineup. Both projects that we're looking at are to do with seasonality. So later on, Liz has done a brilliant interview out in the woods with Scott Petrek, who's one of our Nature Reserves officers, and he's a brilliant bird man, and he's got a great knowledge of bird song. So they're going to be doing a bit of a dawn chorus walk. But first of all, I'd like to welcome Georgia. Georgia is head of marine here at Cumbria Wildlife Trust, or Queen of Marine, as I like to think of it. And what we're going to be talking about this morning, Georgia, is the seagrass project.
Yeah, absolutely. It's all underway. We've just done our first load of planting and it's really exciting. It's quite a new project, a very active restoration in the marine environment.
Brilliant, isn't it? Because, I mean, we do so much in the way of habitat restoration on our nature reserves and on land, and people can see that. But there's all these brilliant things going on in the intertidal as well. So tell us a little bit about seagrass. What is seagrass?
So seagrass is grass that grows in the sea, and we get two species in the UK. So we've got the sort of larger species that grows subtidally, and that's called mariner. And then we have another species called noltii, which grows in the intertidal, and it's a lot smaller. We get both of those in the northwest, and the sort of target species that we're restoring is noltii, that intertidal species. But seagrass is amazing. It's a really, really important marine plant. It forms this amazing habitat, a really sort of meadow of seagrass, and that's really important for lots of marine wildlife. It provides amazing shelter for lots of species, especially juvenile fish. It stabilises the sediment and also can store carbon. So it'll take carbon through photosynthesis into the plant, and then when that plant matter dies and the root system dies, it's locked away in the sediment. And also the fronds of the seagrass themselves dissipates wave power. It's really important as a kind of a buffer zone between the land and the sea, and it'll take away some of that wave power.
So we're basically putting habitats back, the same as we're doing on Skidder Forest. We're putting back habitats that are missing, aren't we, into these areas. So how extensive were these seagrass beds?
Seagrass has declined massively in the last century or so. Locally, we've done some work at looking at historic evidence of seagrass in the northwest, and we've found that there's a 60% decline. There was a big wasting disease in the 1930s that we lost a lot of seagrass, but then recovery has been hampered because of human impacts, basically, and things such as water quality or coastal development has really kind of hindered that recovery.
It would have been extensive in all those areas that we're trying to put it back.
Absolutely.
Fantastic. Well, I think that's a good segue to go and listen to Amber's interview. Amber has been on the podcast before talking about the marine work that we do, and Amber's been heavily involved in this seagrass translocation. So this is planting of seeds, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've got an area that the bed is really, really healthy, and next to that we've got an area where there used to be seagrass, but it's not there anymore. So we're taking seagrass seed from that healthy bed and planting it in the area that we know used to have a really extensive bed. So it's a good site to try these methods.
Excellent. Right, so we'll go straight to Liz then. Liz has been out on the Walney Channel talking to Amber about how we plant seagrass seeds in the intertidal zone.
So Amber, you've taken me down onto the sands now.
I have.
Where are we exactly then?
We are at Rosecote Sands in the Walney Channel, which is just by, you might be able to hear it behind me, the gas terminal. And we're in an area that we're going to be trying to plant some seagrass in a trial restoration. So this bit right in front of us is probably quite perfect. This is in our potential restoration area, which is a site that we've done a lot of testing around to see what the water movement's like, what the water quality is like, and it's all pointing to it being a pretty good place to try.
Okay, let's get going.
Okay, so as you can see, everything looks a little bit similar out here. So
It certainly does. Very hard to find your way, isn't it?
Exactly. So what we do is we mark a location on a GPS unit so that we have a good idea of roughly where we're coming back to, but then we'll mark the exact area that we're going to with a stake, just so that we can visually see where we've been.
Yep.
There we go. Okay, so we're going to try a few different methods of planting. So the first one that we're going to try is just directly planting the seeds into the bed. So we'll just walk a little bit away from this pole.
So we're just taking a few paces to the north?
To the north, yes. So we've done the same at each site. So on the north, we've done our direct planting, and we've done our direct planting on the south as well. And then in the east, we'll do bags. And then in the west, we've done pillows. I'll explain what all of those are in a minute.
Yeah, because it's not like you're planting a wildflower meadow in somewhere nice and dry, is it? And
No.
where everything stays where you left it.
Oh my goodness, I wish we could just sort of scatter them and that was it. But no. We've got a bit more involved with this. So with directly planting, what we've got to do is we'll get right down.
Okay.
Seagrass seeds don't need to be put too deep, but they do need to be buried in the sediment. So what we're going to do is we're going to make a little hole about 2 centimetres deep. We've got our seeds. We're going to put just 2 or 3 of those actually into this hole. So they're just there, just under the sediment, and then put some sediment back on top and just sort of smooth that down. So what's happened now is that those seeds are in the sediment on their own, just buried a couple of centimetres below the surface.
Okay, and how many are you putting down there right now?
2 or 3 in each hole. There's 25 holes, so we'll put sort of 50 to 60 in each square. We'll do that twice here, so then that gives us about 120 per plot. I've got 20 plots in total that we'll be doing that at, so you can do the maths on that one.
Okay.
So that's method number 1. So that one's really good because it's the most similar to what would actually happen to seagrass naturally. So just fall out of the seed pod, get buried in the sediment, and then carry on, hopefully germinating and growing. They could get washed away by the tide quite easily. If they're just there on their own, they could get eaten or sort of damaged a bit more easily. So we've got a couple of other methods as well. So this is where our bags and pillows come in. So these bags here are about the size of a ravioli, and they have about 10 seeds each in them. Those, it's in something called Hessian fabric. So that's a natural fabric that's got nice loose holes in it. What that does is it means that there's just something a bit more sturdy that gives it a bit of protection against things that might want to eat the seeds, or against the tide washing them away. So what we're going to do with these is again dig up a bit of sediment.
And you've gone in a different direction here, haven't you?
Yes, we have. So obviously once these are all buried in the sediment, we aren't going to be able to visually see where we've put certain things. What we've done is at each plot we've taken a compass reading. So at north we've done direct planting, at south we've done direct planting, and then at east and west we've done bags in the east and pillows in the west. And that just means that it's really easy for us to come back to any of our points that has a stake in the middle and go, if I point in this direction and there's some seagrass there, I know how that seagrass was planted. So what we're going to do is we're going to scrape back a layer of sediment, so it's about, again, 2 to 3 centimetres deep, like that. Okay, so once that hole's there, we're going to pop this in and just put a stake through the middle to give it a bit of stability. Once that's in, we'll just pop that sediment back on top, just pop that over. You want to make sure that the bag itself is completely flush with the top of the sediment. And that's because once that tide comes in, it's going to wash everything flat. So even if I build the sediment up around that bag, once that water comes in and washes it over, you're running the chance of the bag getting exposed. So we want it to be like that, nice and flat.
And will you just put one bag in or several?
No, we put several. So it's 9 bags per plot. There's 10 seeds in each bag. There's 30 seeds in each pillow. And that just means that they've got the sort of similar numbers of seeds at each site.
Can you just tell me, I mean, we're talking about all these seeds, but I've got no idea where they've come from.
So these seeds have come from a seagrass area on Conkle Bank. So it's a very, very close local area of seagrass. We've been looking at that bed and surveying it for the last 5 years, just to get a really good understanding of how that bed is doing and whether it's suitable to take seagrass seeds from. We then went out last autumn. We took lots of bodyboards to lay on the seagrass so that we didn't damage it, but it did look really bizarre because it looked like we were trying to surf on mud.
Quite a spectacle.
It was. We got a lot of funny looks from people walking their dogs nearby. But what we were doing was getting really, really up close to the seagrass and picking the seed pods. So these are little pods that have kind of 3 to 7 seeds in each. We pick them at that stage because once the seeds have come out, they're only about the size of a sesame seed. So once they've dropped into the mud, they're gone. So we pick them at the pod side. Those pods then get taken and put in large barrels for a process called rotting out, which is when all that plant material that we don't need rots away and the seeds drop out and sort of sink to the bottom. And once you've done all of that, once you've sorted through all that material, you're left with those mature seeds. And that's what we want to be planting back out here. So we planted some of those back out as soon as possible back in December, and they've been in the beds for a few months now. The other portion of the seeds we actually kept back just in case, again, there was any kind of natural variation that was going on, or keeping them back under controlled conditions would give them a bit of a better chance. They actually got a little shock with fresh water, which has been known to improve germination rates, and then they came out here, and we're now planting those ones in at the point that they would naturally be germinating for the spring.
When I think of spring, it doesn't occur to me that seaweeds and seagrass is affected by seasonality as well.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there's loads of things in the marine environment that are affected by those sort of seasonal changes, and seagrass is no different. It's a perennial, so it is kind of always here, but it does have that annual change of putting those new growth up in the spring through to the summer, putting those seeds out in the autumn, and then dying back over the winter.
Okay, so you've just got the pillows left now. They go in a different direction, don't they?
They do, yes. So they're going to the west. So these are quite a bit bigger. These are about 20 centimetres across, but they're very, very flat pillows, because the problem that you get with these bigger bags is that the sediment inside them can't move, and it doesn't get exposed to the sort of aeration and oxygen transfer that you'd get in just natural sediment. And what that means is that over time all of that oxygen gets used up. It means that the sediment becomes something called anoxic, which means that there's no oxygen there, which means anything trying to live in it can't. And then what we're going to do is pop that bag in. We can then pop all that sediment back on top, give it a nice good covering, and again making sure it's nice and flush with the rest of the sediment.
Mud, glorious mud.
Mud, glorious mud, yeah. It feels like being 5 years old again, doing mud pies at school. And now it is very much a waiting game. Waiting with bated breath and crossed fingers that by the time we come back in sort of late summer, July time, that we'll see some seagrass growth in some of these sites.
That'd be fantastic. So you're going to come and have a peep beforehand? Can you stop yourself from going down here again?
Oh no, I was always one of those kids that went and snuck a look at the Christmas tree before the morning. So I'll be here beforehand just to see if anything is shooting up. So we'll keep a really close eye on them.
Let's just go back up to the bank where it's a bit less windy, and talk about the future for seagrass.
Yes, that's okay.
Your hat's flying away.
Ah.
So Amber, we're back on terra firma. Mm-hmm. I'm quite glad about that in a way. It was quite heavy going down there, wasn't it?
It was, yeah. It's quite sticky when you get into it, especially in those channels.
So tell me, where do we go from here? How are we going to develop this project?
So this part that we've just done is very much the trial stage. We were really trying to understand what the best way forward is and gather as much information about the site as we can. The hope is that once this seagrass starts to grow, if it grows, we'll get a lot of answers around what the best method is to go forward with. So is it that we are better off planting in winter as soon as we've got those seeds out of the pods, or is it better to keep them over the winter in more controlled conditions and then give them that little boost before going back out in the spring? Which method that we've tried today, which one of those is best, if any? Is there any difference? But the other thing that's really important is the site that we've planted it at a good fit for restoring seagrass, or is there something about that site now that means that it's not going to grow there anymore, which would be really disappointing if we do find that nothing grows. But it will be a really important step in actually understanding the site and where to go. So from this point on, it's about scaling up and really going forward with the knowledge that we've got from this last year to make as big an impact on improving the beds as possible.
Because you can't do it on your own. I know that there's been volunteers out planting.
There absolutely have, and they're the backbone of this project. We really, really do rely on and appreciate the massive impact that the volunteers have. We wouldn't be able to do it without them. They're out with us collecting seeds, they're out helping sort through them, pack the bags, come and put them in the sediment. So every part of this project has those people running through it, which is exactly how it should be, because this project is a community project. We want people to be involved as much as possible. We don't want this to just be something that the Wildlife Trust does and no one else gets involved in.
Well, I think the thing that struck me, Georgia, is the meticulousness, the amount of effort that we're going to try to recreate this. It takes a lot of work, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's been very labour intensive. We couldn't have done it without the help of all the volunteers that we've had, and also universities getting involved to try and help with our research. This type of restoration work is fairly new. There's a few other projects that are slightly further ahead than us that we've definitely taken learnings from, but all the kind of knowledge that we can gather on seagrass, on restoration techniques, has been really, really valuable. We've been very lucky to have funding through Ozone, which is corporate donation, and also through the Environment Agency. We've been very lucky to be able to fund this kind of trial restoration phase. Often projects want delivery, and whilst we very much are doing the delivery, it's still at kind of the understanding that it is a bit of an experimental phase ready to then upscale in the future.
So we're putting all this effort in and hoping, crossing our fingers, that some of it's going to work.
Yep, hopefully long-term aim is larger scale restoration, but this is very much the trial phase.
Fantastic, excellent. And then if it works around Walney and around the Walney Channel, are there plans to roll it out elsewhere on the Cumbria coast?
Yes, so we have another small patch of seagrass in the Ravenglass estuary. A couple of years ago we were notified of a dot on a map that said there was a 1 metre squared patch of seagrass in Ravenglass. Our interns went out and actually mapped that, and it was much larger than 1 metre squared, but we don't know if it's a seagrass area that's growing or if it's an area and a patch that's fragmenting. So we need to build up that knowledge base, but absolutely there's an area there that we'd like to further investigate.
I suppose the aim is to have really extensive seagrass beds, isn't it, off our coast? They'd have been like our coral reefs, wouldn't they? Full of life that lives within those seagrass habitats, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. They're like a really important kind of transitional habitat, providing all that kind of refuge for lots of the smaller species so that they can actually grow into the bigger species. And so, yeah, having extensive and well-connected seagrass meadows around the entire country is really the aim we're trying to get back to.
Real. I like that idea of meadows, that's great. So, as I said at the start, Liz has also been out. Liz has been out very early. And she's been talking to Scott Petrek, who is one of our reserves officers, who has a penchant for birds. He really likes his birds and he really likes his bird song, and he's a bit of an expert. So Liz has been out at 5:30 in the morning to Smardale Nature Reserve, a wonderful nature reserve. If you've never been there, definitely worth a visit, to listen to the birds and that kind of crazy, beautifully British phenomena of the dawn chorus.
Good morning, Scott.
Good morning, Liz. How are you?
I'm all right. So it's 5:30 in the morning.
It is.
The birds are already singing.
Yep, they're getting going.
So tell me where we are and what we're doing here.
So we've come out today to the fantastic Smardale Nature Reserve. It's one of our best reserves in terms of its woodland birds, so I thought we'd bring you here today and experience the dawn chorus. I always say there's kind of different levels of difficulty with the dawn chorus. You can make the effort, you can get up in the dark, come in somewhere early to a woodland nature reserve that we have, so here at Smardale or somewhere like Brown Robin down the south or Burness on Solway in the north. Or you can cheat and, you know, set your alarm early, open the bedroom windows and get back in bed with a cuppa.
So the best time is what, about an hour before sunrise?
Yeah, more or less. So yeah, we were just about an hour or so and the birds have really got going now. They're really starting to pick up nicely.
They certainly have. It's quite a record.
But yeah, if you want that kind of wildlife spectacle, this is a great time to come. You know, as you can hear now, hopefully, everything is singing at you. If you want to practice your bird song, you perhaps want to go that a little bit later. So when I do ID sessions, I usually start around about 6 o'clock in the morning, and that's because there are fewer birds singing, which sounds kind of counterintuitive, but it's actually easier to focus on individual species and look at how to ID their songs, how to separate them from different things. Or if you're feeling really liking you on the cheat, you can actually do the dusk chorus and just go out at the end of the day for sunset, because things are still singing then.
Okay. let's go and find out what we can hear.
Yeah, we'll head off.
Okay.
So we've got our starters in the background, so song thrush, blackbird, but then nearest to us at the moment we've got a couple of wrens having an argument. And for the tiniest bird in the UK, they've got one of the biggest songs. You know, it's lots of whistles, lots of scratches, this kind of explosion of sound, and then a really distinctive buzz at the end just to finish it off.
Okay. The wren is that
Yeah.
sound.
Yeah, it's quite a long song. I say for such a small bird, it is that sort of explosion of noise, usually from a dense bit of undergrowth.
Brilliant.
Starting to get again some of our other small birds. So we've got things like blue tits and great tits starting to start up. Great tits sometimes much maligned for their song because it is a very bland kind of teacher, teacher, teacher sort of squeaky gate, squeaky bicycle wheel. Blue tit's a little bit more to it. Yep, so we've got a little blue tit tucked away in here.
That's the blue tit.
Yeah, that's the blue tit.
So Scott, why do they do it? Why do they put this performance on every morning?
So we'd like to think it's all for us, just to, kind of wake us up, a natural alarm clock, but it's very much for them. So this obviously is the start of their breeding season. So these are the male birds really coming out and holding their territory. They're looking for the best bit of habitat they can find, and their song is about declaring that, this is my patch of land, attracting the females in. I've got somewhere really good that we could raise young here. But also saying to other males, like, hang on, this is my patch, move on, find somewhere else for yourself. And the theories behind kind of why this time in the morning is that the air is perhaps that little bit much crisper, a little bit lighter, the song will travel much better. Certainly you kind of go out middle of the day, it doesn't feel just as kind of magical as it does now. It travels much better now.
It
Ripples
really
kind of across
rings
the
out,
landscape.
doesn't it?
Yeah. Well, we've got this song thrush here, so again you can kind of hear, it's almost like it's forgotten what it's doing, so it has to tell you 2 or 3 times. So it's just got those set repetitions, those little phrases, it'll do over and over and over, then move on, over and over, move on. But they're also quite good mimics as well, actually. I've bumped into song thrush in the past, imitating things like oyster catchers. And I've been going around the site thinking, right, where's the oyster catcher? And then you realise actually it's a song thrush sat on the top of a tree. So
I knew starlings mimicked other birds. I didn't know song thrushes did as well.
yeah, no, it's a bit of a surprise. Kind of, you get this sort of this song coming through, but it'll be tucked up somewhere near the tops of the trees. They usually quite like that kind of that height, as most of the thrushes do. Song thrush, mistle thrush, blackbird, usually sat at the tops of the trees. But he's probably just behind the main trunk. We'll probably see his silhouette against the first bit of light this morning.
Yeah.
A lot of the species we've heard so far this morning, they are resident species. Song thrushes, robins, blackbirds, they're around all year. So they actually get going that little bit earlier. So even as early as late February, things like the mistle thrush will be singing. Through March, you can then really get to grips with learning individual songs of those residents, things like the robins and blackbirds. And then once the floodgates open in April and all of our migrants start arriving, that's when we can then start adding in those extra warblers, particularly, but also things like, hopefully, redstarts, pied flycatchers. They'll all be arriving through April. So by the time you get to May, you should have your kind of full suite of species to go out and explore in the morning.
And I read somewhere that many of the migrants arrive overnight.
Absolutely. So when you go out first thing in the morning, every morning can be different. And sometimes if the birds that are migrating have bumped into a little bit of weather, so if it's a bit windy or a bit wet, they'll sort of drop into the first bit of available habitat. So if you get it right, you can get this incredible kind of massive increase in the number of birds. here last year actually. I was doing some survey work, and the number of willow warblers was insane. And we have actually got our first one. There we go. So a very nice kind of, almost like a spinning top that's kind of do 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 do, and then suddenly kind of runs out of steam. A gorgeous little song.
Yeah.
So these are a bird that look very, very similar to chiff-chaff, but vocally completely different.
Yeah.
So chiff-chaff, is onomatopoeic almost. It says its own name. Chiff-chaff, chiff-chaff, chiff-chaff. Willow warblers, a little bit more kind of bounce and spin, but that descendingness to them. In fact, we've got two having a slight disagreement here. We've got one right next to us and one just down by the bridge. They're brilliant birds. Almost like, on the last bit of battery, they're just running out. So as it goes through the song, goes slower and slower and slower.
The primroses on the bank are fantastic, aren't they?
Yeah, they're all coming out, and we've got the bluebells just starting to poke up underneath them as well. So it's kind of it's one of the best times to be out in our woodlands. They're full of bird song, they're full of wildflowers. And one of the reasons I was keen to bring you to Smardale this morning is this path that we've got, which is brilliantly flat. So whatever your ability to get out, this becomes a really accessible bit of woodland. Lots of our reserves where we've got this fantastic wildlife aren't the most accessible, just because they're limestone pavements or they're rocky outcrops. They are difficult. But here, Smardale is a nature reserve that runs essentially along an old railway line. So we've got this flat surface, it's been improved, but still retaining all the wildlife value that the site's got. And I say it is nationally designated for its breeding birds. And there are birds right from start to finish, so you've not got to get to certain bits of the reserve. It's a fantastic area that anybody hopefully can come and enjoy. So the willow warblers are definitely disputing. We've got one. He was on one side of the track, and now he's heard his counterpart on the other side of the track, and he's just flicked across to go and declare, this is my patch. You need to move on somewhere else.
Just going through the gate and under the railway bridge.
Yep. And we're working our way down to sort of the main viaduct itself, which in itself is just a fantastic view. You can look down on the beck down there and bump into things like dippers and grey wagtails and goosanders. Oh, we've got a nuthatch in the background there, that really fast kind of trill. So quite a rapid little song, and they're obviously one of our woodland specialists. So fantastic little bird, almost look like a dart. They're kind of really pointy billed and pointy ended, fantastic kind of slate bluey colour.
They're beautiful, yeah. I can never remember, do they go up the tree or down the tree trunk?
They can do both.
Oh,
so
right.
It's tree creepers that can only go up. So quite often you'll sometimes see a tree creeper, it'll go up and up and up the trunk, and then it'll fly down to the bottom of the next tree and do the same again.
Yeah, because it can't go down the trunk.
Yeah, its tail feathers are nice and stiff to help it actually sort of hang onto the tree almost and climb
really?
upwards.
Mm-hmm.
So as a slight disadvantage, it has to go up and then down and then up and then down. We've got another one of our early migrants just starting to come into earshot, which is the chiff-chaff. So really nice, simple song, depending on which part of the country you're in, as early as late February potentially, but a classic kind of March, one of the first birds you'll start to hear that isn't one of our residents. So like the willow warbler we heard earlier, they look very, very similar, but their song is just completely different.
Absolutely.
So they're a lot easier to identify by song than by sight. I say they're kind of like, because they're one of the first birds that start the spring off in March. They kind of that first kind of sign that the winter's ending, things are turning.
Absolutely.
So they're a really welcome sight and sound.
So where do they overwinter, Scott?
So there's some birds that will actually now stay in the UK, partly through climate change. It's mild enough in places, but lots of them will migrate. They'll go down into southern Europe, northern Africa. And then they'll be making their way back up to the UK to breed. And the willow warbler we heard earlier, so they're a complete migrant, so they leave. They also head south, but they perhaps go to sub-Saharan Africa, like a little bit further. So one of the traits they have is they've actually got a slightly longer wing than the chiffchaff.
Oh,
So
really?
that little bit longer, which suggests that they're adapted for that slightly longer migration. There's another gorgeous blackbird just on our right here. So there he is, classic position, top of the tree. I say it's a rich song, and it's not going to be rushed. It's I'm doing this at my pace. Yeah, just at the top of the ash tree there. So he's just sat at the very tips of the tree here in front of us. It's a classic position for things like blackbirds and song thrushes and mistle thrushes.
Wonderful. Another blackbird over on our left.
But we're here at a woodland site today, so we'll expect certain species. If you were down at a wetland site, you might bump into different species, things like sedge warblers and reed warblers. If you're really lucky, maybe like a grasshopper warbler as well. But then, even within the woodland, there's different kind of niches. So you've got those sort of the big mature oaks that will support things like our specialists, maybe the redstarts and the pied flycatchers. The scrubbier areas, so patches of blackthorn and bramble where you'll bump into things like blackcaps and garden warblers. There he is, just at the top of this little hawthorn here. Chiffchaffs have got a habit, they actually dip their tail, so it's almost like kind of they're pumping themselves up. Gorgeous song.
So clear, isn't it?
It is. It's absolutely lovely. There he is. They look like they're
He
putting
really moves around, doesn't he,
so
when he's
much
singing?
energy into that song.
Yeah.
It's almost bouncing on the twig there. It's trying to be as loud as possible.
Now, Dawn Chorus Day, International Dawn Chorus Day, is the 4th of May, isn't it?
It is, yeah. So first Sunday in May, I say very much timed, because that's when everything should be with us and everything should be singing. But talking of singing, we've got something that's doing something a little bit different in the background, which is our great spotted woodpecker. We've got another one just coming over here in flight, actually. So really distinctive flight. They bounce. So as they go up, they flap, and as they drop down on the bounce, they actually fold their wings in. So almost like a little missile going along. And so they're not a bird that actually sings. So their song equivalent is that drumming that we hear. So that's them declaring their territory. Yeah, drumming away. This is so their equivalent of the song. So, like we've had as we've walked along, sort of the willow warblers, either side of the track, shouting at each other. This is their version. Yeah, so there's definitely you can hear the kind of almost like the feedback. One goes, then the next one goes, then it goes back to the first one.
It's like an echo, isn't it?
It is, yeah. And it's the same with lots of our birds. As you're walking along, especially linear features like this railway line, you'll have a robin on one side and a robin on the other side. You'll have a wren on one side, a wren on the other side, and you'll hear the kind of one will sing, and then suddenly it sounds like it's on your left, and then it's back on your right, and it's actually two birds having an argument over the track. And now it's fisticuffs, so the drumming didn't work, so now they're under proper argument.
So that chatter was the woodpeckers as well?
Yeah, so that's when they've come a little bit closer together, and they're potentially on the verge of actually having a physical fight. But we've got a road here just on the track in front of us here as well, so not all about birds, there's some extra things.
Hasn't seen us, I don't think.
Bump into first thing in the morning. willow warblers are definitely one of those songs that here at Smardale just seems to echo the whole way down the reserve. But they're definitely one of those species that here in Cumbria we don't do too badly for, but down south they are suffering from climate change. They're being pushed further and further north. So where I used to work down in Gloucestershire, we'd get willow warblers at this time of year, but we very much considered them as passage birds. You know, they were dropping in, it was their first morning in the area, so they give it a bit of a song, and then they were carrying on. They didn't actually really breed in that area anymore. And they're certainly declining in the south and being pushed further north. They seem to need those sort of cooler temperatures.
Oh, tremendous view opening up here.
It's
coming out of the woodland.
The viaduct here. So we've still got a good amount of bird song here, but you can kind of feel as the morning's progressed, everything's just starting to turn down from 11. So everything's still singing, but there's perhaps a little bit more of a pause in between individuals, and this is a great time to then go out and actually start looking at those kind of individual species.
It's probably about an hour after sunrise.
Yeah, we've got those first bits of light starting to really illuminate the hills over the top there. Obviously being in the valley, sunrise, we haven't yet seen the sun, but we've seen the evidence of.
So if people can't manage to get on your walk, Scott, what would you suggest?
There's a good selection of sites across the county. All of them will have some form of dawn chorus, be a different mix of species. The more regularly you go out, the more you practice, the more you'll kind of get to know those songs. And yeah, certainly by International Dawn Chorus Day in May, you'll kind of have the full complement of species. So get to grips with it this year, learn a few, experience it, and then come next spring, start in March, because that's when you've got just 5 or 6 species to learn in the morning, so you can then really build your sort of repertoire up during the spring.
Okay, well, I think we'd better turn now because we've got to this fantastic viaduct, and as you say, the volume is thinning down a bit.
Yeah, just turning down a peg. We've still got a willow warbler giving us a good serenade here. But one question for you then, Liz. Was it worth getting up so early in the morning?
No question at all. Absolutely it was. I'm not sure I'll do it tomorrow.
No, it's a few times during the season.
Absolutely brilliant the way they've caught the bird song there at Smardale and been able to pick out those individual birds. It's just amazing. I used to do a lot of dawn chorus walks before Scott started, but I used to do mine really early, which is probably why I never used to get anybody on them. But we used to do them at 4 o'clock in the morning, and if you ever do get the chance to get out, if you get out that early, you're actually there before the birds start singing, and then you get the full build-up. So it's a beautifully British phenomena, especially to get out in a beautiful oak wood, in a bluebell wood at that time of year. Get there early before the first bird starts singing, and then you get the full experience of the first robin, the first blackbird to join in, and that builds and builds into this crazy crescendo where you can't tell what's one bird from the next, and then that kind of calms down to the 5:30 time when Liz and Scott were out listening to their birds over at Smardale, which was just superb. If you really liked Scott's take on the dawn chorus and you'd like to go out with Scott, he's doing a series of birdsong workshops over the May bank holiday, so he's doing 4. He's going to be very tired at the end of the May bank holiday. So he's doing Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday at different parts of the county. So if you'd like to book on, go onto our website and search for birdsong workshops. Another thing that we are doing to do with birds is we've got this Operation Seabird going on, haven't we, Georgia?
Yeah, so Operation Seabird is happening at South Walney Nature Reserve on the 28th of May. It's going to be a family fun day with lots of different activities about all the kind of coastal and marine wildlife that you can find. Some of these nests are barely visible, so hopefully this event will just kind of show you what they look like and just raise awareness of kind of what's there at what time of year and what to look out for.
It's very much about informing the public, isn't it, about disturbance of coastal nesting birds as well, isn't it? Our reserve at South Walney and our reserve at Walney Island, they have these brilliant breeding bird colonies, but they're only there because we police those areas in the breeding season. If you have a dog and you're out on the coast at this time of the year, it's really, really important to keep the dog close to you, because once these birds are disturbed, especially if it's chilly at the time and they have to fly away from the nests, then the eggs can chill, the chicks can get predated if the chicks are already out. So that disturbance of coastal birds is an incredibly important thing that we need to educate the public about. And there was a couple of other things, a couple of big events that are going on. One is on the 31st of May, the Discover the Lost Rainforests event at Staveley Woodlands, which will be a fantastic event at a wonderful time of the year. And then the other one is a nighttime adventure. So if you want to experience nighttime wildlife and get that full experience of what it's like to be out in the woods at night, then that's on the 13th of June, and the details of all of those things can be found on our website. Anyway, I think that probably brings the podcast to a close. I'd just like to say thank you very much, Georgia.
Thanks for
for
having
your
me on, Joe.
brilliant insight into what goes on the marine side of things at Cumbria Wildlife Trust. I'd really like to thank Liz, our roving producer, for producing these wonderful interviews out in the field. And as always, if you've got any ideas of things you want to hear on the podcast, please just email us at mail@cumbriawildlifetrust.org.uk, and hopefully see you next time.